I'm going to show you how to dye your clothes with things from your kitchen. Hi everyone, welcome to My Green Closet. It's Fashion Revolution Week and today I have a video about how you can naturally dye your clothes. Now before we get into it, I need some disclaimers because this is technically not the proper way to naturally dye clothes. I am not using a mordant, which is a pre-treatment that helps bind the dye to the fabrics, and I'm also not using any special dye equipment. Because of this, the colors will not be color fast. It's important to know that natural dyeing is different than commercial dyes you'd buy in a store. It requires some experimentation and might not turn out how you planned, but that's also what's wonderful about it. It's a fun experience, and depending on the fabric you use, your equipment, the water, you might get totally different results. But be prepared for that because it is different than a dye that you just buy where you know what you'll get. So first, the fabric you use is really important. Don't bother trying to dye synthetics, it won't work well. The best fabrics for natural dyeing are wool and silk because they're protein fibers like your hair. They hold color well and will give you the longest lasting results. Plant fibers like cotton can dye, but you won't get as strong of a color and they tend to fade faster. So the method I'm about to show you is a very simplified way to dye clothes. However, if you are interested in getting into natural dyeing and doing it at a more advanced level, I will have some links and resources for you below in the description. So the first piece I dyed is this skirt. I made this skirt a few years ago from organic cotton, which I also naturally dyed at the time using coffee and a potato starch resist to create this suede-like effect. However, this capsule wardrobe season, I found I just wasn't excited about the color anymore and I wanted to change it up. I had been thinking about adding a yellow piece to my capsule wardrobe, so I decided to dye the skirt with onion skins, which creates a really beautiful golden yellow color. Yellow onion skins are a common kitchen food waste, and you can collect them and use them for dyeing. The first step is to put the onion skins in a pot. Now you should be using a separate pot for dyeing, one that you don't cook with. Cover the skins in water and boil them for about half an hour to an hour. And it's a good idea to let the onions steep for a while. Then you want to strain the skins out of the liquid. Now the best way to do it is to add the piece of clothing you want to dye directly to the pot, but since I don't have a separate dye pot, I decided to use this bucket to dye the clothes in. So I soaked the skirt in the hot onion skin water and left it for about 24 hours, and the longer you can leave it in the dye, the better. Then it's time to rinse it, and you want to be gentle with rinsing and not wash it too hard. You also want to be careful the first few times you wash it, and I recommend hand washing the garment because dye will still come out. So this is the final skirt, and I think the color came out beautifully. As you can see below the yellow, there is still the effect from the previous dye. And this has been such a fun piece to wear so far in my capsule wardrobe. The skirt will very likely fade over time, but it's easy to dye maybe once a year or once every couple of years to just brighten up the color. The second piece I dyed is this silk top. I found this at a thrift store and I thought it was a great shape, but I really didn't like the color. It's sort of a nudie pink color, which I don't like wearing on my skin tone, so I decided to try dyeing it, especially because silk is a really good fiber for dyeing. I wanted to use red cabbage, which is a really fun dye because it's pH sensitive. I've dyed with red cabbage before, but I've never used it on a top, which as you'll see, might not be the best idea. So again, a similar process to the onion skins. I first chopped up some of the cabbage, put it in a pot with water and boiled it. Then strained it out and added the dye to the shirt in a bucket. Again, it's better to do it in a dye pot. I let the shirt soak overnight again and rinsed it out. Now I think this color turned out beautifully as well. Red cabbage has kind of a bluish, purplish gray color, and with the pink under it, it made it a bit more purple. However, the thing that makes red cabbage such a cool dye, the pH sensitivity, is actually not the best thing for this project. Red cabbage is basically like the unicorn of natural dyes. When it interacts with something basic, it goes more green, and when it interacts with something acidic, it can turn into quite a bright pink. Now this is really cool to see, but I realized it's not the best for a top. Because I wear a baking soda based deodorant, if the baking soda touched the material, it actually turned it green. And this could be a problem if you're sweating because your sweat could change the color. Now with this style of shirt, this isn't a huge problem because it is looser. However, it did happen to me and it'll likely happen again. So I'm probably going to be over dyeing this a darker color, something like indigo. So while I do recommend trying red cabbage as a dye because it's a lot of fun, and it does actually go back to the original color after washing, I don't recommend using it for something like a top or anything that interacts with sweat, creams, deodorants, or anything that might affect the pH. So those are 2 garments I updated and dyed just using things from the grocery store. Natural dyeing is incredible, but like I said, it takes patience and experimentation, and there's a lot more to it than this simple version. But it can be a wonderful way to give some new life to pieces that you have or pieces that you found at the thrift store. So we're in the middle of Fashion Revolution Week, which this year marks the 5th anniversary of the Rana Plaza factory collapse. And this week is really about spreading awareness and making us think more about the impact of our clothing choices. You should check out some of the events going on and other people's alternatives. I will link a playlist of some of my favorites. Also, challenge brands to be more responsible with their manufacturing and join the conversation of ways that we can all be more conscious with our closets. Thank you for watching, and thank you so much to those of you supporting me on Patreon, and I'll see you in the next one.